It's recording. So,
Brill.
we're going to hand the meeting over to Andy Farr.
Have we got any more? Is everyone here?
I'm just admitting them in now. iPad 2 has joined us. Whoever iPad 2 is. Welcome, iPad 2.
That's an unusual name.
Anybody else that joins in, Kirsty, I'll just admit them in as they come in. Because we've got 17 registered for this seminar, and so what I'd like to do is hand the meeting over to Andy in his workshop. I can see a beautiful picture of your chair, Andy.
Sorry, I've got you on my laptop as well. I was just turning the sound off the laptop.
That's okay. So most people are muted, so we're going to hand the meeting over to Andy. Andy's a local artist, and we're going to share this meeting for about 30-45 minutes, something like that. So Andy, we want to hand the meeting over to you. Tell us who you are, what you do, and why you do it.
Okay. Just want to say, did I see Heather trying to join? Oh, Heather.
Yes,
She's in.
thank you. I'm only here for a short while, but
No worries.
happy. I
Happy
really
birthday.
wanted to.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was going to say happy birthday to me. Yeah. Thank you.
Go on, Andy. Back to you.
Okay. So I've got a few things I was going to talk about. Because I had a chat with Kirsty about a week ago, and we talked about what I might talk about. And I was going to start by talking a little bit about what the impact of lockdown has been on me and what I've been up to. Because just before, sort of back in February, which seems a long time ago now, I was trying to get a project off the ground for City of Culture next year, and I was looking for venues, and it would all get very frustrating, and felt like I was banging my head against the wall with the council and various other people. And then, to be honest, lockdown in some ways has been, it sort of gave me permission not to have to do that, and just to get on and do some paintings. So I started, and I'll give you a whiz around the studio in a second, but I actually just started by painting some of the things I was seeing around me, and I started painting more kind of nature and flowers, which I'd not really done for quite a while. So I'm going to I'm going walkabout. I'm going to flip
Camera, yeah.
if it lets me.
No.
Yeah,
Andy,
yeah.
can you put yourself on full screen?
Am I not on full screen?
No, I can just see.
Oh, I don't know how to do that. How do I do that? I'm full screen on my camera.
Ah.
It's okay, don't worry. We're on full screen now.
Are we?
Yeah.
There you
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
Yeah.
And is it still when I flip the camera around?
That's the portrait view.
Yeah.
Which it shouldn't be.
Now,
There you
now it's on full screen.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Obviously, it just takes a little bit of time to catch up. Yeah, so what I ended up doing was sort of wandering around on my daily Boris walks, taking pictures of flowers and stuff. So this was one in Jefferson Gardens in Leamington. It was an apple blossom, and I did various magnolias, and I just started painting trees and things, which in some ways was a bit of a release, because I was saying I was kind of, and I'll talk about this a bit later on, I do quite a lot of stuff which is around issues and mental health, so it was actually quite nice just painting whatever I wanted to paint. And then I started doing some pictures more around the idea of waiting and looking out. So this one in the middle of the screen at the moment is actually of my wife in our front room, looking out into sort of our garden. It's a bit idealised, there's a few extras featured in there, but nonetheless, it was, and I sort of was trying to capture a bit of a hopper kind of feel with the picture. And then, which some of you will have seen on Sitting Rooms of Culture, I saw this paint. This is part of a photograph by someone called Silvina Toncheva, who's a Leamington-based artist, and she took various pictures of herself in different outfits waiting. So that was another inspiration. So it was quite nice. I was saying it was quite nice just doing a few things which were just for pleasure almost, rather than necessarily with a particular agenda behind them. So what I'm going to do now is just talk a little bit about how I got into art, where I came from. I guess I'm the classic. I'm the classic. Painted a lot at school. I was talked out of doing A levels because art wasn't a serious subject, and I ended up going down quite a different path. Worked in marketing and stuff for 25 years or so, and then I was getting very frustrated with wood painting, which I've done more recently, but it kind of sums up how I was feeling about everything. Kind of like everything was rushing along. I was in an office. I wasn't really in control of anything. And then, almost fortuitously, I was very ill, and I could quite easily have died. I was in hospital for a couple of months, and then I was off work for 5, and that gave me a kind of different perspective on life. And I went back to work, quit very quickly, and stopped commuting down to London, and wasn't quite sure what I was going to do, but I ended up doing more and more art. And both my sons are quite artistic, and they kind of got me back into painting. And then I did, probably the key thing I did was I wrote to a few artists. One of the ones I wrote to was a lovely woman called Caroline Holt, who runs a studio and classes down in near London. And I spent the summer just seeing her once a week and painting stuff, and she would critique it, and she gave me exercises to do. And she gave me a lot of confidence, but the main thing she said was just go out there and experiment, just do whatever you want. And I ended up doing more work. There's one down here on the floor, which was quite an early one, which was a piece based on a carousel I saw in Paris. And I just kind of liked the movement, and it became a bit more abstract. And I started doing quite a lot of paintings around movement and dance and things. And then what happened next? Oh, yeah, well, what happened next was that World War I centenary came along, and I felt the need to do something more serious around that. And I had the idea for a project about getting teenagers to realise the significance of World War I to them. Because for me, it always seemed like the stupid war that should never have happened, and yet so many people died. And yet it was about to be consigned to history. So this painting was one of a series called Lost Generation, which where I was working with schools and exhibited quite a few places around the country. But these two, it's actually based on a painting which some of you may recognise, by Nevinson. But I replaced the 2 dead soldiers from his painting with Matt and Ben, my 2 sons. And I did a few paintings like that. I did one with a class of school kids in Trinity School in Leamington, which was based on the the Men in Road, and I replaced a lot of the soldiers in that with the kids from the school class. And that kind of was a bit of a landmark project, because I got Arts Council funding for it, and it suddenly made me think, Jesus, you know, I'm actually able to, I have a voice and I can use it through art. So following on from that, I went to see Graham Chawton at Coventry University, and I signed up to do an MA, and that again was quite an important step, not because I was taught a lot in the MA, but just because it gave you the freedom to express yourself, to be encouraged to try new things, and to kind of have a story and do something. So this painting here it's actually a smaller painting, which I did before I did a bigger painting, even though it's quite a big painting in its own right. But it's actually based on my father, who died 2013, a few years ago. But he'd been bipolar from when I was about 12 or 13, and that was quite a traumatic, when he first became ill, that was quite a traumatic experience. So I spent most of the MA trying to explore my feelings and memories of my, you know, how that impacted my growing up, and trying to understand what he was going through. And this painting is really about the whole, he'd been a station master, and then there was a guy called Beeching who basically closed all the railways back in '64, and he suddenly ended up in an office and hated it. And I'm sure that was part of the reason why he ultimately became very frustrated and had various problems. So that kind of got me into, despite my interest in mental health as a subject, and I spent a lot of time talking to other people who'd been bipolar, and I did a whole series of paintings based on that. And I tried to get those exhibited various places, and one of the places I contacted was the Institute of Mental Health, which is an outfit in Nottingham, attached to Nottingham University, but with links to the NHS Trust. And they said, actually, why don't you do a new project with us around post-traumatic stress? And that led to a whole new series of collaborations between me and people who'd suffered from trauma, trying to tell their stories through paintings. And one of those is this painting here called The Twisted Rose, which is based on just a comment that a guy made in therapy about how he'd never get away from the baggage of his past. And I won't go into his story, but it's all on my website. But that he now felt like a twisted rose growing towards the light. And that just felt like a really powerful image to convey. So that led to this painting and about another 20 others, which toured the UK through 2018, 2019. But sadly now all sitting in my studio stacked up against the wall. But it was quite a good experience having quite a decent sized touring exhibition. This picture has actually never actually turned into a picture. It's based on a lovely woman I met through that called Laura, who's a poet. And this is some pictures based on some photos of her I took when she was reading her poetry, which she hadn't really done before she got involved in the project, but now she's much more active. So yes, and then what shall we show you next? So I'm going to take you to the most recent painting I finished, which is again one which is sort of autobiographical or maybe not, but it's based on an abandoned theatre. And as you can see in the middle, there's a grand piano, but I painted most of the painting, and this is actually me sitting in the audience. I painted most of the picture about 6 months ago, and I wasn't sure how to finish it. And then there was a guy who posted on Facebook last week saying that he had a grand piano that if he didn't sell it would be destroyed. And I suddenly thought, actually, this painting might be a bit of a metaphor for how things are with lockdown and the possibility of things reopening, but maybe not. And are we going to be spectators in an audience, an audience of one or whatever? So that suddenly felt right as a thing to have on the stage for that painting. And then as you can see, this is the rest of the studio on Corporation Street. It's a lovely studio, except for the fact that for 5 months of the year it's unusable because it's too cold. It has no heating and it has a metal roof. So once the temperature outside is below about 10 degrees, it's just almost unbearable. So that is me rabbiting on. Put me down for a second and throw it open to people to ask me questions.
Right, guys. So, what was it? Andy, you mentioned Corporation Street there. Is that Corporation Street, Coventry, or Corporation Street?
Yeah, Corporation Street, Coventry. I'm just down from the Transport Museum.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Next to the Philip Larkin.
Oh, yes. Yeah. The Tudor
Which is
Road.
not, again, it's a nice location, and it's quite nice now that Philip Larkin's closed. But when the Philip Larkin isn't closed, then there's a little alley down the side of my studio where drugs are dealt on a frequent basis. So it's can be interesting leaving the studio at night.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over and I'm going to unmute everybody so that they can start to ask questions. I'm just going to do this now. So participants. So everybody should now be unmuted. So would anybody like to ask Andy a question?
Hello.
Go on, ask your question.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. What medium are you working in, Andy? And
good
what
question.
medium? Yes.
Right. Yes, I work generally a mixture of acrylics and oils. So quite often I'll start painting in acrylics and then finish it in oils. It depends. I like the immediacy of acrylics, but I like the fact that you can move the paint around a lot more with oils. So it tends to be I'll do some of the underpainting in acrylics because you can crack on with it, and then use oils over the top, or other stuff. I've just done a painting which is in another online exhibition, which I think was on Sitting Room of Cultures, which is just a tree on a sort of abstract cliff that was about resilience, which actually was charcoal powder and PVA glue, but and a bit of oil paint. So it varies, but mixture of oil and acrylic, and I guess I'm using more and more oil with time.
Yeah. And are you finding that you talked about Caroline Holt and going to London? Was it Caroline Holt?
Holt, actually, H-U-S-L-E, but yeah.
Yeah, Hulse. Is that right?
Hulse, yeah.
Yeah. So you were going to London and you were getting all this, well, not all, but support. And I've done part of the MA as well, and I agree. You end up, in a sense, self-teaching, and I just think the artist's journey. I do collage, as you know, and it's sometimes more about exploring the ideas rather than the finished product. What would you say to that?
Yes and no. I love exploring the ideas, but I also like the discipline of having exhibitions and a finished product. So I haven't shown, but I have so many started and unfinished paintings in the studio, and without sort of lines in the sand for something needing to be done or an exhibition or something, then I would probably be a lot less productive. So it's almost a discipline for myself that I need to say, okay, this is a project, there's going to be an exhibition or there's going to be an end result, and it's going to be next March or wherever. But I know that I work better when I have to get something finished. It kind of focuses my mind. Oh, so the one thing I didn't talk about, which is my next project. So, as I say, a couple of years ago, I started a project with the Institute of Mental Health, and I was contacted by them again 2-3 weeks ago about doing some work on what we're calling portraits of isolation. But it's right. I mean, a lot of the ones I did before, I actually met people face to face, and we'd exchanged emails and pictures and stuff. This we're trying to do, obviously, in isolation, digitally or whatever. So I'm now in contact moment with 6 people, and I'm going to try and do something based on each of their stories, which is quite interesting because some of them actually are finding, there's a girl I was talking to, or a lady I was talking to over the weekend, who actually is finding in some ways isolation quite positive, because she was suffered from anxiety and panic attacks, and actually not feeling the pressure to go out is actually almost a positive. And what she's worried about is when lockdown finishes and she's under pressure to go out again. So it is quite interesting. But she was also saying, and this is something I've sort of given some thought to, is that actually the process of discussing her feelings and her anxieties with an artist is actually quite powerful, because a lot of therapy is word and speech based, and actually a lot of the memories and the things that trigger stress and anxiety are actually more visual and episodic. And so actually working through the imagery and the colours and the sounds and the smells can be quite an interesting way of thinking about why you feel the way you do. So yes, that'll be the next project.
Andy, didn't you say as well that, so the ones you did before, when the subjects like saw their paintings and saw sometimes themselves in a different light, that again was like sort of a bit mind-blowing for them and completely changed their...
Yeah. I mean, not in every case, but there was, I mean, there more than one, but there was one in particular that sticks in my mind. Who was she was called Rachel, and she'd suffered a very traumatic birth, during which she wasn't actually, whilst she was in theory having a cesarean and under general anaesthetic, she was actually completely conscious of everything that was going on around her, and that led to all sorts of complications. And I created a painting based on what she'd said to me, which was of one of the things she said was she had this image of her old self, who was this vibrant, happy, party-loving kind of self, lots of colours. And then she had this current self, which was all dark and black and whatever. And she could see the old self and she could see her current self, but she couldn't get across this chasm from one to the other. And when she saw the painting, she said, actually, I'm a third person now. I'm sort of both the people in the painting, but I'm actually a third person who can understand those two different aspects of my own personality. So she actually found the painting quite a powerful way of visualising how she now was. And she seems fine now. I mean, I was chatting to her a few weeks ago, because she works for Waitrose, about whether they had granary flour or not. But she found it quite, Yeah, I mean, it was interesting that a lot of the people I worked with, I'm still in touch with, and they all found it quite a therapeutic experience, which is...
Andy, can I ask you a question about your background in marketing, please?
You can.
That sounds a bit weird, but I sort of study marketing as well, and I know it changes my behaviour compared to other people. So I wonder whether you're conscious as an artist that you're looking for what the audience wants and what the client wants, as well as what you want as an artist. Because I think what Heather says is quite important. What you do and maybe what you don't finish, but what you learn is really key. But I see you as being somebody who wants to deliver a final product and have that sort of the audience see it and understand it and feedback.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I mean, Janet, who is on the call, actually used to work with me and work with my wife in my previous life. But yes, and towards the end, or probably the last 15 years of my marketing career, I was in developing new tools and analytical approaches. But yes, I think and then obviously with those, there was a need to, they weren't just nice to have, so you were actually having to generate something which was going to be used, and you'd have a deadline and a conference and whatever to launch it. But yes, I think there is an element of me needing to communicate to people. So for me, art is the way in which I now communicate my feelings about the world and what I want to say. So it's important that I do that. But there is some kind of end result, because it's part of the conversation I'm trying to have about things. The other aspect of marketing, which to be honest has been very useful, and I say I've had Arts Council funding twice, which for somebody who's a late-ish career artist is relatively unusual. And that's because I know what the Arts Council are going to be looking for in their requirements, and which boxes they want ticking and which audiences they want you to be appealing to. So there's an element of, certainly that skill set, I think, is helpful in terms of getting me to an audience and getting me to where I want to get to. And I hadn't really thought about it impacting on how I paint, but you're probably right. Yeah.
Andy, can I ask a question? I'm sorry, I haven't got my video up. I've got audio problems, so it's easy. The audio is better if I leave the video out. But it's Mindy here from ArtSpace, and I was interested to know. I love your work, and you know, a very interesting sort of journey as an artist. And I just wondered what you think your kind of development, what you would want for your own development next as an artist.
That's a very... I can answer that in two ways. One, I would really, really like not to have to instigate every project myself, which may seem weird, but I feel I spend a lot of my time, and actually, which is quite nice for the IMH, they did actually approach me to do this work. So I think I spend a lot of time trying to organise and set up exhibitions and things. And in a way, what I was saying about the City of Culture thing, I'd ended up spending a lot of time talking to housing associations and to different outfits about trying to get a project off the ground. Whereas actually what I quite like doing is the stage I'm now at in my latest project, which is having conversations with people, trying to come up with ideas, throwing those ideas back to them, and just that dialogue which leads to a painting. So if I could do that, and someone else would provide the environment in which that then led to me, then that would be quite nice. But also, I think, and I would say this is really only over the last, again, partly because of lockdown, I have felt less pressure for every painting to tell a story and be important. So I've quite enjoyed just doing paintings which are beautiful, nice, whatever. I don't want to be pejorative about that, but you know, just painting stuff that people would appreciate at an aesthetic level without necessarily there being a story or a narrative behind it. So I think I got a little bit, horrible word, but constipated about I couldn't just paint some blossom, or I couldn't just paint a nice portrait. I felt I had to do something that said something. And I think that's partly the MA kind of did that to me a little bit, in the sense that you're critiquing what you're doing all the time. So you kind of feel there's got to be, but that's probably also a bit of me. So in some ways, that part of my journey is quite, I feel a bit more positive about.
Yeah, great. That's really interesting. I wondered also, is there anything technically, I mean, you know, your work is lovely, like I adore it, but yeah, I wondered as you as an artist, is there anything like technically you think I really want to develop that particular skill?
Not in a sense that I guess I would like to be obviously like to be a better artist, but what I tend to do is in some ways because I quite often challenge myself by telling someone else's story, I work back from what the painting needs to be, and then I learn the skill, or I force myself to experiment to learn the skill. So one of the paintings I did for the series about trauma was a very, not quite photorealistic, but certainly quite a realistic painting of a photograph album of the ladies' two different families. And again, there's quite a very sad story behind it, but I felt it needed to look quite realistic. And I did another 3 paintings of a woman who'd had a couple of miscarriages and then a birth, and I wanted them to look like those photographs, those big happy mother and child photographs that you see in the kind of high street photographic shops. So in a way, by forcing myself to achieve a certain outcome, it puts a lot of pressure on me technically. So from that point of view, I'll then look at a YouTube video, or I'll look at something about how to actually do a particular effect better, or transparency, or whatever. So for the painting of, to mention the painting of Sylvina, I was really struggling to get the highlights to be the right colour, because obviously if you mix white with yellow, you get a horrible colour. So what I ended up doing was I watched a video about, and actually ended up doing really bright underpainting and then a transparent layer over the top, which got me to a different result. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, Mindy.
No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. It's really interesting.
Andy, I have a question for you. On the cover photo, it looks like a sort of World War II with your sons in it, and I saw a statue down at St Pancras Station, which is a couple, and it has that sort of thing. It has that sort of war all around it. Was that an inspiration for you, or is that nothing to do with it?
No. Well, the story behind that painting, which is actually that painting's in public display in Newcastle. It's bought by the then Lord Mayor, and it's based on the Newcastle's War Memorial. So it was done as part of my World War I project. It's quite a big painting. It's 9 foot by 5, and so their War Memorial is called the Response, and it's basically on the right. It's sort of ship workers and people in their uniform, their work attire. And then you go across to the left, they're turned into soldiers. And then in the actual War Memorial, and I forget who did it, Gosford John, I think, is the sculptor. But 2 children waving goodbye to the soldiers. They're not actually my kids. They are, what's her name? Carol Slight, who's the Warwickshire Arts Officer, and I put something out on Facebook saying I needed two children to paint for painting, and she actually came forward and said, yeah. So it's Ross and not Ross, that's her husband. I forget what the kids are called, but yes, it's her kids. Which I went to her house. We did a photo shoot and everything. It was quite good fun. That painting is actually in the Central Library in Newcastle.
Why?
Absolutely. But again, it's an interesting, and to sort of touching on, I think, what Chris was saying about how you so this wasn't so much marketing, or this was about using my marketing skills, because I had that painting and it had been in several exhibitions, and I thought, what do I do with a 9 foot by 5 foot painting? So I contacted various galleries in Newcastle, including the Lang Gallery, which is like the main gallery, and they said, who are you? Go away. And then so I wrote to a journalist and this was only 4 or 5 years ago or so, when you still had journalists at local papers. So this was the Newcastle Chronicle, and he actually ran a small feature about it. And then someone picked up on that, and it ended up being used back in a meeting that the regiment were having, a kind of reunion to do with the centenary, and then the Lord Mayor saw it in the net, and she basically said, we need the painting in Newcastle. But it was interesting how, you go to the galleries and they say, who are you? You're not a well-known artist, you're not famous enough, why would we have your painting? But actually, you get it to the right people, and suddenly you get an incredible response. And I had loads of letters and stuff from people in Newcastle saying how moved they were by the painting and whatever. And that is one of the frustrations, yeah. So like all of the Twisted Rose stuff, the last exhibition, which was in Lancaster, I thought wasn't going very well at all. And then they had Light at Lancaster, which was like an evening event with lots of stuff going on in the city. And over that weekend, we had 9,000 people in the exhibition. And you just think it's just how do you actually get to people, and how we get to people after lockdown, you know, can be an interesting one. But yeah, it's just there is an audience there for visual art and for all sorts of art. It's just how you get to them. And the mainstream galleries can be so frustrating to deal with.
Yeah. Is there anybody else that hasn't asked a question yet that would like to ask a question of Andy?
I'd like to ask just a bit about your process. So how do you actually go from the initial idea or concept towards the final painting? Or or how do you sort of start working out the ideas?
Sometimes, yeah, that's a very good question actually, because sometimes I will start a painting and it will end up in a completely different place to where I started out. So actually, probably my most successful painting, which won a prize down in London a couple of years ago, and I'm just creating it up to go off to the US. It's a big painting, 1.8 meters square painting. But that started with me seeing the reflection of a sunrise in a puddle. And I painted this on this big canvas fairly loosely. And I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do with this now, but I've done that. And then I had the idea of doing some other things. So it ended up with a sort of a bit of a room, and then the back of me in the painting, and which was sort of like a self-portrait. So I had no idea at the start of that painting where it was going. Whereas sometimes I'll have like some of the ones I did for the Twisted Rose, I had this idea for the lady who'd had 2 miscarriages and then a successful birth. I had a very clear idea of what I wanted the 3 paintings to be. And so then more just a case of painting them very precisely and accurately, which in some ways isn't that rewarding because you've already in your head finished the painting, and then it's just a case of getting there. Whereas others, it's much more of an experimental journey where I'll put paint on and something will happen and that'll give me an idea for what the next stage will be. So for example, the painting of the tree on the cliff, I had what I now see in my head as a cliff as an abstract piece of paint on a canvas for several months, and I had no idea what I was going to do with it. And then the idea of putting a little tree on the top of it, sort of looking a bit distressed by the wind or whatever. So the process is can be a bit eclectic. I do have a projector which I use. So sometimes if it's important to get something to be very precise, I'll project part of it or whatever. And I use a lot of photographs as part of the process. So I didn't really show you, but the picture with everything going into the middle was sort of, I had looked at lots of different photographs of London and commuting and stuff before that idea came to me. So, yeah.
Okay, any other questions, anybody? Speak now or forever hold your peace. And did you have a favourite Coventry artist?
Ever.
Do I have a favourite Coventry artist? Probably Michaela. Do I have a favourite? I like John Devayne's work. I've seen and heard him talk quite a bit. I actually like some of the sculpture more in Coventry than I think necessarily the artwork.
Okay.
And I can never remember who. It's someone Michaela knows who is quite a famous Coventry sculptor, and I forget what his name is. Heather's probably gone, hasn't she? But I think
Wagstaff.
Yes, yes.
George Wagstaff.
Yeah, George Wagstaff. I am not a big fan of George Shaw, I have to admit. Doesn't do a lot for me. I get that it's technically brilliant, but it doesn't really, it doesn't really inspire me. There was a guy who I'm not sure you'd class him as a Coventry artist, although I think he did the work in Coventry. There's a piece in the Herbert by I don't know if he came from Africa or from the Caribbean, but he had a residency in Coventry, and he painted there's a painting of tombs floating, like coffins floating in the sea, which is quite a powerful painting. It's it certainly used to be in the Herbert on the right hand side as you walked in that sort of long corridor. Yeah. I forget what his name is, but he was at one of the had a residency at one of the social clubs in Coventry for a while.
Okay. Okay.
I got a question.
Away you go, Benji.
Okay. Well, I'm 5 minutes away from you. I'm on Corporation Street as well. My question is, I was taking some photos yesterday, and one I really, really love, and I'd like to make it into a painting. So how do I get the proportions right from transferring it over to a canvas?
Oh, well, the simplest way, it's interesting, I have this discussion with my mum who paints, and she always insists on buying a canvas that's exactly the same shape as the photographs that she wants to use. So that would be the easiest way. I mean, actually transferring it over, I'm sure you've come across gridding.
Yeah.
You draw, or these days you can do it in, there's probably whizzy ways technically, just drawing the grid. I, being lazy, would probably project it to get the very basic outlines. Gridding is what my sons still use. Both of whom are, well, one's trying to be an illustrator, one's trying to be an artist. Both of them not earning enough money to live properly, but they're still soldering on. But yeah, gridding is your answer, I'm afraid. Can be quite painstaking. You see it actually on, if any of you watch Portrait Artist of the Year, you still see a lot of people doing that on there. No real way around it. I mean, the Renaissance artists actually used camera obscura quite a bit, which is interesting, which I'm not quite sure how you create one of those, but there's a lot of discussion around, how did Canaletto get his paintings so accurate? And I think there's a fair amount of evidence that he used camera obscura, so it kind of reflects, I don't quite know how it works, but it kind of projects an image in real time of what you're looking at. Don't know if that helps.
Yeah, that helps a lot. I think projection is my best idea, because when I did sort of gridding, it went horribly wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I used to be I used to feel projecting was wrong, and then when my kids were doing A-levels, the teacher said, no, it's fine. Lots of artists do projecting. I mean, if you want to get the basic proportions right, fine. If you're trying to do something more abstract, why would you do it? So I feel very comfortable about using it. I know I've got one particular critic of it who said, you projected that as bad. And kind of tells me off, but it doesn't bother me, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have one final question for Andy? Anybody? Anybody can take the final question. Brian, would you like...
Sorry, can I ask about scale?
Yeah.
Have you tried doing small scale work? And how do you feel about it?
Miniatures.
I have. It depends how small you define as small. I like big. And I got very big when I was doing the MA, to the extent that I say I did one painting that was 2.1 metres square and one that was 1.8 metres square, which I've been saddled with for quite a while, but I'm now sending off to the US. But the crate for it, I'm not paying for the crate, the dealer's paying for the crate. The crate for it's actually costing over £400. and we can't move it. Me and my son can't move it. We have to have it as two pieces to actually move it because it weighs about 70 kilograms. So yeah, but I do like painting big. To be honest, I don't know why. I think partly because size has an impact as well as, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
No, you don't have to paint small. You
No,
paint big
I
so
am
well.
trying to paint at a more manageable size, just from a practical standpoint of moving stuff around. But generally speaking, I wouldn't paint much smaller than 60 by 40 centimeters. I think because I did a commission for James Sanders of his grandparents. What was that? That was 75 by 60, and that's about as small as I get, really. Don't know why.
Gives you room to put the details in. Well, look,
I think so. Yeah, and also there's a bit of impact sometimes from sheer scale.
Very much so. I like big. I like to walk in and see something just big on a wall, and just it impacts you. With the minute you walk in, your eyes are drawn to it. So I like big for that purpose. Right, ladies and gentlemen, that is really pulling us towards the end of our time. I'm sure everybody would just like to say thank you, Andy, for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. Thank you for sharing your story with us, and thank you for giving us your tips and your advice and sharing everything with us.
Can I just say one more thing?
We've got a budding young artist at City Rooms of Culture who's just joined us. He's 3. Welcome, Jude. And but thank you for taking the time, Andy, today.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that if anybody wanted to find out any more about any of the things I'm up to, my website is, not surprisingly, is andyfarr.com. So all one word.
And Twitter and Instagram, Andy. Are you a Twitterer and an Instagrammer?
I'm an Instagrammer. I used to be a Twitter, but I don't.
You're no longer a twit.
I find it hard work, to be honest, and there's so much abuse on Twitter that you don't get with Instagram. So Instagram, Andy Farr Art, and the website andyfarr.com, and all of the stuff around. So the website tends to be a bit of a, all the paintings are on there, but there's also a lot of words and stuff around the paintings.
Okay. Explanations and things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, from the next City of Culture, we're 222 days away. That's all we have left. So you best get painting, Andy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And everybody else. But thank you for hosting. Thank you for being the second Sitting Zooms of Culture, Andy, from all the team here. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day and sharing your time with us. And thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Andy.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
I think that's virtually it, Andy. Thank you very much for your time, mate.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you. Bye-bye.